Let's take our... Brothers, before the break, as you know, we had presentations by Cardinal Tobin and by Archbishop Vigneron, and we were planning to go on with Bishop Deely, but because of catching airplanes for our speakers, we interrupted that flow in order to have our speakers give their presentations. So we're back now to Bishop Deely and the Committee on Canonical Affairs and Church Governance.
Thank you, Your Eminence. Brothers, during the meeting of the Administrative Committee this past September, and as a result of requests from several members of this Episcopal Conference submitted to the conference's leadership, the Committee on Canonical Affairs and Church Governance was asked to formulate a protocol outlining non-penal administrative measures that can be imposed by a diocesan bishop on a former diocesan or auxiliary bishop present in the diocese, taking into account, of course, the rights and obligations of all those involved. So what you have before you in the gray document is a draft of the requested protocol for our discussion this afternoon. So before the floor is open for the discussion, allow me to make 4 brief introductory remarks. First, the committee wishes to underscore the valuable service our bishops emeriti, our seniores, have given to our local churches. In preparing the protocol, the committee was mindful of the many occasions when St. John Paul II underscored the respect and gratitude that are owed to these bishops emeriti for their service. Even our Holy Father, Pope Francis, so often emphasizes the fact that one's later years are a privileged seat of wisdom in life. So woven throughout the protocol, therefore, are important affirmations of the fraternal bond that naturally exists between the diocesan bishop and bishops emeriti, and an abiding hope that any measures that are put into place are the result of mutual dialogue and deference to authority. So with that in mind, I want to be clear that the protocol that you have before you was written to address a very particular set of circumstances or sets of circumstances. It envisions primarily cases where a bishop has already resigned from or was removed from his office as the result of a grave act of commission or omission, according to the Code of Canon Law, the motu proprio sacramentorum sanctitatis tutela, or the motu proprio as a loving mother. Such grave acts may have involved sins against the 6th commandment of the Decalogue, such as the sexual abuse of a minor, or negligence that resulted in grave harm to a physical person or to a community of persons. The protocol also envisions circumstances when a diocesan bishop determines it is necessary to act firmly and decisively to respond to the scandal that has arisen due to a bishop emeritus's prior action or failure to act, so that the faithful now entrusted to the diocesan bishop's care are sufficiently cared for. Second, the proposed protocol presupposes that the competent ecclesiastical authority for judging bishops in penal cases, and therefore for imposing ecclesiastical penalties upon bishops found guilty of committing a grave act of commission or omission, remains solely that of the Supreme Pontiff. Only the Holy Father can remove a bishop from office or impose other penalties on him, such as dismissal from the clerical state. Accordingly, what is articulated in the protocol before you does not involve penalties, canonically speaking. Rather, they are in the category of non-penal measures that a bishop readily has available to assist him in the exercise of his executive power. In particular cases, it may well be that the Holy See itself has imposed upon a bishop such non-penal administrative measures. In recognizing this competence of the Holy See, the protocol repeatedly encourages the diocesan bishop to communicate initially and regularly with the office of the Apostolic Nuncio on the situation that has arisen in the diocese and the measures that he, as diocesan bishop, intends to apply to address it. So third, this protocol can best be described as a resource. As a resource, it is, in essence, a summary or a compilation of existing provisions contained in universal canon law, which, as I indicated previously, are already at the disposal of a diocesan bishop in the ordinary exercise of his governance authority. Chapter 9 of the Directory for the Pastoral Ministry of Bishops, and a 2009 study from the Congregation for Bishops devoted to the Bishop Emeritus were additional sources consulted during the protocol's preparation. It is the committee's hope that a resource of this kind will prove useful to a bishop when responding to a particular case, again, either as a complement to any truly penal or non-penal measures already exacted by the Holy See. The measures described in the protocol can always be imposed by a diocesan bishop if he determines it is for the good of the diocese. For these reasons, the protocol does not contain any innovations to existing canon law. Neither is the protocol prescriptive in nature. Where the diocesan bishop's government authority is truly lacking, the protocol properly states that he should actively seek the intervention of the Holy See. Finally, at the conclusion of the protocol, in section 12, the resource addresses a very difficult problem: the application of the USCCB's approved statutes in particular cases. This section was added to the protocol in response to requests from members of the conference to offer further guidance on the matter. So the discussion item is open to amendment, and that is the gray sheet, and there is a basket outside, and we have plans as a committee this evening to accept amendments that might be proposed to this document. And so I call that to your attention if you would like to make suggestions concerning improvements to the document or things that you think need to be changed. And in the meantime, Cardinal, I'm happy to open now to a discussion.
Thanks very much, Bishop Deely. I'd like to do here what we did with the others too, maybe shorter. I'd like some initial response comments from the brother bishops, and then we'll break from that, and we're going to open up a more open field for questions and discussion, which would obviously include Bishop Deely's material, but also all the others and more. So just a few comments at the beginning. If you have some particular clarifications you'd like from Bishop Deely on this particular document. Archbishop Kurtz.
Bishop Deely, thank you so much. I'm curious and want to make sure I understand number 7. That would be line 83 to line 94. About public notice. Could you explain, kind of walk me through that a little bit? What is the intent of that?
It may be a couple of things I would say. It might be necessary for the bishop in a given instance to make it clear to the public that the Bishop Emeritus no longer speaks for the diocese, for example. And if, in fact, since questions do arise about particular activities that a Bishop Emeritus might want to engage in other dioceses, the diocesan bishop might be contacted to say, we know he was removed for X, Y, or Z reason. Are there restrictions? Have you placed any restrictions, or that kind of thing, so that there's some kind of consistent dealing with the issues. But I think one of the main reasons for this paragraph is that notion that only the diocesan bishop speaks for the diocese, and the retired or the bishop emeritus does not speak for the diocese. So when we have particular difficulties or problems that might come up in the press or concerning past actions and so on, it's still the diocesan bishop who is the one who has to speak.
So if, maybe this is too delicate a question, let's say that there is someone, a bishop who has been accused of misconduct of a sexual nature, and we're doing a list of priests who have been credibly accused. Does this give us any guidance on what to do with?
I think my own mind, basically, I think it would be there are two different situations that I can think of. One is the bishop himself is accused of sexual abuse. And then, it's about his own situation. He's free to make a statement if he wants. But if he's talking about a report that's come out which says that there were problems in the way in which this diocese handled cases over a period of time, the present diocesan bishop is the one who speaks for the diocese, not the one who may have been in power or in authority at that particular moment. So it's the present diocesan bishop who needs to be the one who speaks in the name of the diocese because he's the one responsible for it.
Archbishop Jacobs, wherever you are, didn't see him. There he is over there.
I might have been dozing or something.
A little louder, please, Archbishop.
I might have been dozing. Number 8, did you mention a document that would spell out what is included there? He may also request that the Holy See extend his prohibition more broadly or deny the right entirely. Is
Where are you?
number 8, line 98 and 99.
He may also request that the Holy See extend this prohibition more broadly or deny the request the exercise of the right entirely. That would be preaching. So
my
he has
question-
the right to do it in his own diocese, but he doesn't have the right to do it outside.
Okay, I must have been dozing.
Anyone else?
I don't see anyone else.
Okay, that's good. Bishop Dilly, I mean, obviously, there'll be more questions and all now, but that's good to start up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
And we
Bishop
will
Daly.
take questions, I say, till when? Till 5 o'clock this evening, and there's a basket outside.
Amendments
Amendments or...
till 6, till 6 p.m.
Brothers, now I would like to turn us to any other suggestions or ideas you have. Now, of course, they may be ideas and suggestions relative to the presentations earlier this afternoon, which is fine and good, but there may be others. I have already received many ideas from you regarding items that we ought to consider as we move forward, and I want to thank a number of bishops for writing, particularly beyond the documents that you have in front of you, with some other suggestions down the road that a number of you made. I thought a number of them were very good suggestions, but this is a forum whereby we can do that. We have heard many other suggestions raised today, so that's always good. As I mentioned earlier, in order to ensure that the ideas that are raised receive the appropriate follow-through, I have established a task force. The task force will also be responsible for providing regular communications with the bishops and with the wider public about the crisis response activities of the conference. In fact, I've already received a number of letters about ongoing public communication during this crisis. So that's one response already, but communication is obviously very important here. All activities of the task force will be carried out in priority collaboration with the relevant committees and the offices as to their mandates. The task force is deliberately small to facilitate quick action. It is charged with consulting widely, especially from the many excellent lay people and organizations that have offered ideas and resources as it studies the issues we raise. Another comment I could make here, we have received a large number of suggestions from lay organizations, lay people. A number of them very, very intelligently laid out. I mean, these are professional groups. So we're grateful to them, and so our ongoing communication with them is pretty important. The task force will be coordinating the work of the whole conference. Therefore, after consultation, I have decided to appoint to membership of this task force the former presidents of the conference, I am grateful to His Eminence Cardinal Timothy Dolan, to Archbishop Joseph Kurtz, and to Archbishop Wilton Gregory for being willing to serve in their capacity as still active former presidents of the Episcopal Conference, and I will serve as the chair. The work of the task force will culminate with a report at the June meeting. So, with all of that said, brothers, the floor is open on any kind of comments about the crisis, about the reports today, anything you might want to deliver or speak about.
Cardinal Mahoney.
Cardinal Mahoney.
Thank you very much, Cardinal DiNardo. We have spent a lot of time very fruitfully on what I would refer to as the effective response to the crisis and the formulation of some wonderful plans and ideas for moving forward. But I would like to address the affective part of this, and that is our devotion to each other as members of the conference and the College of Bishops. Remember, over the years with the various general councils of the church, many of them had as a subset the difficulties of bishops and priests. St. Charles Borromeo did us a great favor in his participation in the Council of Trent, and he and his uncle, Pope Pius IV, developed a lot of sensible approaches to the affective relationship of bishops. Remember that in those days, bishops did not have to reside in their own diocese. They were seen as benefices and had several sees. Now, that was not very helpful, and when he went to Milan, he's the first bishop who had been there in 70 years, and he found all kinds of difficulties and problems. It would seem to me that what our effective relationship would look like would be take some of the suggestions that Charles Borromeo implemented in Milan. He said that we are not bishops alone or separate. We belong to a college, and we have a responsibility to the college. He also gathered bishops of his province for the very first time, and they spent a lot of time on their own spiritual and pastoral lives. He insisted on the need for his priests and the bishops to care for the parish of their soul. And he began with living very simply. A lot of things that we can learn from Charles Borromeo. But he also called us to a deeper relationship beginning with prayer. And it would seem to me that we as bishops need to form more and more prayerful associations among ourselves, such as Jesus Caritas or the like, and ongoing opportunities for our own relationship based totally on Jesus Christ. We need to lead by witness, and certainly prayerful witness as devoted brothers to each other. We are blessed in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles with Cardinal Timothy Manning establishing a house of prayer for priests. And it has become a wonderful center. Priests come and go every day of the week for spiritual direction, for confession, for support groups, and of course, we bishops also participate in that. I think our people in our diocese would be extremely generous if we proposed in our own diocese that we have a small house of prayer, especially for priests. Also, our collegial communion, I think, is threatened the same way it was in Charles Borromeo's time, and that is from outside influences. In those years, Kings, emperors, wealthy merchants, all kinds of folks tried to interfere with the council and with the lives of the bishops. We must not allow outside groups of any kind in this country or anywhere else to interfere with or attempt to break the bonds of our collegial union. I'm hopeful that the January retreat will offer an opportunity for all of us in small groups to discuss our needed commitment to an effective collegiality focused in and around our relationship with Jesus Christ. Thank you.
Thanks, Cardinal Mooney. Thank you.
Archbishop Wester, followed by Cordileone.
Archbishop Wester, and then followed by Archbishop Cordileone.
Thank you very much, Carlo Donato. This has been a very helpful and I think important conversation we're having, and we're certainly benefiting from a lot of wisdom here. It occurs to me, though, that we might also benefit from the wisdom of our priests, our brother priests. They are our closest collaborators, theologically, spiritually, administratively, and I believe that by tapping them in a more formal way, those bodies of priests with whom we have a relationship already, NFPC, NOCIRC, CMSM, ANCH, that this would be very helpful for us. And I think that with hindsight, we might have done even more than that, it seems to me, in 2002, but that's certainly something I think we benefit from now. So I'd recommend that if that's not in the offing, that we would consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Archbishop Cordileone, followed by Bishop Barron.
Thank you, Your Eminence. We've certainly been hearing about how important it is to listen to our people. I think we're all trying to do that. Like most of you, I've held a number of listening sessions in my own archdiocese, and a number of helpful insights surfaced, but not the least of which was manifestations of the divisions afflicting our church right now. And there were two clearly defined camps. So some of this might be hard for us to hear and receive, but I'm reporting what I heard, and they want their voices heard. So one camp maintained that no one is admitting what the real problem is. They maintain the real problem is the prevalence of homosexuality in the clergy, and we need to admit it, address it, and eradicate it if we're going to purify the church from the scourge of sex abuse. But then the other camp was adamant that the real problem is an all-male hierarchy, because women would never allow this to happen, and so the solution is to admit women into all ranks of holy orders. Now, I bring this up not to verify or support either of these. They're overly simplistic, but there is some merit in each of these. So, for example, we don't have authority to change our Lord's will, but we do sometimes act as an old boys club, and that's characterized by cronyism, favoritism, and cover-up. So we're trying to look at solutions to address that and fix that, and we're still hoping to implement them eventually. So we're trying to respond to what the legitimate concerns of people in this camp. But what about the people in the other camp? There's also, I would hasten to point out, a temptation to jump to an overly simplistic conclusion, which is that there is a direct causal connection between the presence of homosexual priests and bishops in the clergy and the sexual abuse of minors. It's tempting maybe for some to jump to that conclusion, but it obviously cannot be true, because there are priests with a homosexual inclination who do not abuse minors and are serving the church well, and heterosexually oriented priests who do abuse and are serving the church poorly. But there is a correlation between the two. And I'm sure you're all aware of the study by Father Paul Sullins that got a lot of attention recently, where he found a near 100% of correlation between an increase of homosexual clergy and an increase in sex abuse of minors. He relied on many sources for his data, not just the unverified Pennsylvania grand jury report. I think the worst thing we could do is discredit this study so we don't have to deal with it, or ignore or deny this reality altogether. I think we need to lean into it. The correlation exists and we have to face it. To flee from it would be to flee from the truth, and to be perceived as fleeing from the truth. We often reminded of the words of Pope Francis that we should follow the path of truth wherever it may lead. You know, more and more of our people are not buying the conclusion in the John Jay Causes and context study, and that includes some reputable professionals in the field. But I think it has some validity. It must have some validity. But even admitting the veracity of the conclusion, it still does not get us to the root of the problem, because we don't know why there's a correlation between an increased rate of homosexual clergy and an increased rate of sexual abuse of minors. So I would propose we commission a study to figure this out, and or at least allow competent professionals in the field who want to conduct a study to have open access to all documentation and other such sources they need to help us understand this. Because it's really important we don't infer from this that there's a direct link of causation. This Father Sullivan study is, by his own admission, just a helpful first step. So this study would simply take the causes and context study to a deeper level. And this is something we can do now. We didn't need anyone's authorization to commission that study, and we don't need anyone's authorization to commission this one. I think in doing so, not only will it help us get to the root of the problem, but we will be doing a service to many good priests who risk being wrongly and unjustly maligned by those who would like quick and easy answers. We need to support them too. On the contrary, the answers will take time and they will be complex, but I think it is imperative that we find these answers so that people will know that we're taking this seriously. Thank you.
Bishop Barron,
Bishop Byrne.
followed by Archbishop Burns.
I'd like to go back to a theme that was prominently featured in the talks this morning, namely the investigation into the Archbishop McCarrick situation. The crisis really begins with the revelations about Archbishop McCarrick, and as I listen to the people of God, this is still a major concern for them, that we get to the bottom of how he was able to rise so high in the hierarchy, how he continued to have such a disproportionate influence, it seems, in the life of the church, even after retirement. I know, Cardinal DiNardo, you called last summer for that investigation. I strongly supported that. After some resistance, it seems, from the Holy See, in October, we got the indication that they were very open to opening up the files, et cetera. I'm just curious, first of all, the status of that. It seems to me, unless someone is appointed to do the investigation, it remains just a kind of velleity. And I'm wondering if we can bring any sort of, respectful pressure to bear to say we really want this to be launched. Because it seems to me until we get at that, it's not the whole story, but it's an important part of the story. And I think our people are calling for some clarity on that. So just curious about the status of it, and then what pressure maybe we can bring as a conference to make sure that work gets done.
Thanks, Bishop Burns. The Holy See isn't conducting an investigation. Certainly the 4 dioceses here in the States are involved. I believe, even from the Holy Father, that there's ongoing investigation even in Rome. But that's about all I would know. I don't know anything further. But it may be something to look at, brothers. Archbishop Burns, followed by Bishop Conley.
This is perhaps a small thing, but earlier in the summer, Cardinal DiNardo, you mentioned a set of goals that you were hoping for. And one of those goals was meaningful constraints on an accused bishop. And I just want to offer just my own experience of those last 2 years where there's been no meaningful constraints upon the Archbishop to whom I am still a coadjutor, pending appeal. I think what I've experienced over these last 2 years is I'm still a little jet lagged, so getting words is a little tough sometimes. But it's been grating on the people of God in Guam. I keep getting asked, well, where is Archbishop? And I have to say, I have no idea. There's no contact. He's not been assigned to a certain place. In fact, he's been, at least pending appeal, restricted from returning to Guam. So it's been an experience that, again, we're a small place. and seem to be neglected at times. But I think it's the kind of thing that would be meaningful to the lay faithful if there were meaningful, recognized constraints during the time of investigation, and then, of course, after, if he's been found guilty. So I just wanted to offer that from my experience.
Thank you, Archbishop. Thanks very much. Bishop Conlon, followed by Bishop Cousins.
Look, I realize that we're about as popular as a company that puts boots on car wheels right now. And I appreciate the efforts that the different committees have made to put these proposals in front of us this week. But as Cardinal Cupich and others have pointed out, we may already have remedies in our law. More importantly, I'm concerned that perhaps we've overemphasized the concern about sex. You know, there have been those who have said the Catholic Church is hung up on sex, and this may be further evidence of that. You know, we bishops are capable of malfeasance in many other areas as well. And so if this is the problem this week, next week the people of God may be challenging us in other areas as well. So I just wonder if there's a certain blessing in the Holy See not allowing us to go forward with these provisions this week, and that in the meetings that are taking place in February in Rome, there may be an opportunity really to adopt a much broader range of ways of holding bishops accountable and providing steps to deal with that. Frankly, I agree with Cardinal Cupich about the metropolitan system, but maybe that can be strengthened in the legislation of the Church so that it is truly effective and perhaps a little bit more visible with a little more accountability to it. Finally, I just want to say that I stood before a church full of people promising celibacy when I was ordained a deacon. And when I was ordained a priest and a bishop, I once again promised fidelity to the Church's teachings and to the pastoral care of God's people. I have to say I'm a little chagrined to being asked to sign some document at this point that says I will be accountable to certain standards.
Bishop Cousins, followed by Bishop Strickland.
Thank you, Your Eminence. My comments have to do with a topic that was raised this morning by the Director of the National Review Board when he said meaningful fraternal accountability. I feel very privileged to be a part of the brotherhood here that I've been a part of for 5 years, and at different times have received great support from this brotherhood. I do also think that there are ways in which we live as brothers that could be better. And I think that meaningful fraternal accountability is something we ought to take very seriously, and that could be very helpful to us. For example, I dream of a day when a bishop who's having trouble in his diocese and finds himself under kinds of accusations in the press would go to the brothers of his region and say, "Brothers, do you think I should resign? I'd like to know what you think, because I want to do what's good for the church and not just to protect myself. I lived through a very difficult situation in my own diocese, and that sort of attitude would have really helped in my own situation." But also, I dream of a day when we as brothers are strong enough to say to another brother in our region, "We think you should resign," even if he's not ready to hear that. We think that, in fact, these things are serious enough that you should resign. Those are difficult conversations to have. I don't ever experience us. Nobody wants to have those conversations, but they can be very important conversations to have. And of course, when necessary, as was mentioned by the Director of the National Review Board, to appeal to the Holy See if we need to do that. I do think that those kind of actions are going to be important for us to be able to restore trust, and I think that they are what true brotherhood is about.
Bishop Strickland, followed by Bishop Dan Thomas.
I really echo what Bishop Cousins just said, and I think that idea of fraternal correction, I would love to see us really develop that. I've been I'll be a bishop at the end of this month, 6 years, and I've been edified by the goodness of the men in this body, of dedication and tremendous hard work. I want to really commend everyone who organizes these gatherings. The prayer day yesterday and the presentations this morning and this afternoon were really top-notch, greatly presented, and for me, greatly appreciated. What occurred to me as the presentation from the counselor or psychologist was the virtues of the gospel in combination with science, in a sense, the science of virtue, to use all the wonderful tools, but to go back to those basic values of the gospel that we're called to live. In my own personal reflection and in talking to my flock, a rural part of East Texas, about less than 10% Catholic, what I've heard from people, which resonates with me, is that the whole McCarrick reality, how did that happen if we really believe that what was going on was wrong? And I think that's a core issue that is sort of out there in the air as I hear it. We've heard something about the whole question of homosexuality. I was pleased to hear it from the seminary report, because seminarians are vulnerable in the position that they have. I think we have to really take that question seriously. It's part of our deposit of faith that we believe homosexual activity is immoral. The people, those that we label homosexual, are children of God, and they need our great care. But to me, that real care comes from acknowledging the sin and the reality that all of us are sinners, called from sin to virtue. I think the question with the McCarrick situation is, how did he get promoted? How did all that happen? If we really all are of one mind that this is wrong and sinful. There seem to be questions about that, and I think we have to face that directly. Do we believe the doctrine of the church or not? There's a priest that travels around now basically saying that he doesn't, and he seems to be very well promoted in various places. Brothers, I think part of the fraternal correction or the fraternal support we offer each other is to say, can that be presented in our diocese? That same-sex marriage is just fine, and the church will one day grow to understand that. That's not what we teach, and I think we really have to ask those serious questions. Condemning no one. We get berated for bigotry that is not real. Jesus Christ brings good news to the world. With the recent youth synod, confusion and difficulty, and all of that is what I heard. I didn't hear much about the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. He lived, died, and rose so that we could be free from sin and death. I think the more we can share that good news, the more we can overcome the tragic things that we're facing now.
Bishop Dan Thomas, followed by Bishop Tom David.
Eminence, just a word to say thanks again for all the work that's been done, in particular, for example, on the special commission. Having heard the brothers today, I'm wondering if we might be able perhaps to come in the meantime before a final solution is reached. At least we might be able to come perhaps to an action resolution, even by consensus tomorrow, regarding submitting ourselves, as our priests would be, for example, to a Metropolitan Review Board. So following the suggestion of Archbishop Chaput, I'd be glad to hear in greater detail, because I'm not certain I understand altogether the possible liabilities that might be involved. I certainly understand the complexities and the funding that would be required. But I'm wondering if we couldn't do something perhaps sooner rather than later to hold ourselves accountable, at least in the meantime. And could that be perhaps that we would follow up with allegations against a bishop with the Metropolitan See, that could be reviewed by the review board of that Metropolitan See, whether they be allegations of sexual abuse of minors or harassment or misconduct, and then have that review board of the Metropolitan See present it to the Holy See. I don't know if there's further discussion seen for tomorrow, but from speaking to a number of the bishops in these days, it seems to me that this at least would be something worth pursuing with greater information. Thank you.
Thanks. Certainly it is possible tomorrow, I think, ongoing. Thanks, Bishop. Bishop Thomas Daly, followed by Archbishop Naumann.
Just a few things. I think the issue of Archbishop McCarrick is still in the minds of people troubling. Because of Spokane and some of our dioceses that were in bankruptcy and dealt with abuse and scandal, there may be a heightened awareness of it. But the questions asked about how this came to be, was it, and with reasons, and some in discussions with lay people, very faithful lay people, who would not be on left or right as in ecclesiologies, wondered, did this come to be because we have certain bishops or priests who don't see anything wrong with anything consensual sex between adults? It might be they themselves were compromised. Others, ambitious clerics on the ecclesiastical escalator, doing everything to contain things and not saying anything, and then moving up the ladder. And then maybe, sadly, the realization that some who were involved in this didn't think anything really, what did it do with my vocation? So I think there's a general, still a feeling of our lay people that this warrants further examination. The second thing regarding any type of look at seminaries, I haven't heard mentioned a look at religious orders, their novitiates and houses of studies. Because we, as a bishop, I've heard concern, and prior to that as vocation director, that there were some experiences in some novitiates of predatory behavior. Some individuals left over that. Some chose to leave for a while and then go to a diocesan seminary. Lest we have to revisit this issue again, I would hope that if there comes to the point where we look at our seminaries and houses of formation, we do so in a thorough way that would include, again, the religious orders. I think the whole church would benefit. And the final point is our concern with parents. Those good, faith-filled families that continue to encourage their sons and daughters to priestly and religious vocations, they do have a concern about what is happening here this week, and a concern that we as the body of bishops leading and as their shepherds take very seriously these issues, and that they want to continue to provide and to encourage those vocations. And again, these are faith-filled parents that are committed to the church, that are very understanding and patient. But my feeling is, judging from their conversations, they're running out of patience.
Thank you, Bishop. In the course of the last few months, I'm sure we've received thousands of letters. A lot of them have come to me, and I tend to read the letters that come in from God's people. And there are a range of experiences. But there's one thing I can say to you, brothers. If there's one thing that nags at everyone, it's the Archbishop McCarrick thing. It seems to be ubiquitous. So though there are many issues, perhaps even in the long run more crucial, this is the one that I think has to be addressed. It's just bad for our people. Archbishop Naumann, followed by Archbishop Lucas.
Yes, thanks. I just wish, first of all, to thank you, Cardinal DiNardo, for your leadership during this time, and all those that helped to put the proposals together. You've been working under the gun, and I think a lot of work has gone into it, and I commend you. That said, I, as a metropolitan, I'm not looking for any additional work, but I agree with what Archbishop Chaput said, you know, that I think we've got an existing structure, but it would have to be empowered. Because right now, a metropolitan really doesn't have that authority to go in and to investigate. And I think we really need to look at that as perhaps a better route to go for many reasons, because it's an existing structure. It will involve a lot of lay involvement with utilizing the independent review boards that are already there, and not at the cost that seems to. I don't think this is something we should skimp on cost. I think it undermines everything we do if we don't get it right. So if it takes more money to solve it, I'm in favor of it. But again, I think we have to be good stewards. Another thing that would be helpful to me, we've talked a lot about publishing lists, and in our archdiocese, we've engaged a law firm that's completing a study of our files, and we will be publishing a list. But it really would be helpful, I think, to get best thinking on what those lists, what should be the criteria for those lists. We hear the words credible. The word credible in the charter is a pretty low bar. It means something simply that can't be disproved. We heard the word plausible from the victim assistance coordinator, who gave a great presentation, and we heard the analogy of Humpty Dumpty today, too, that once a person's reputation is harmed, it's very hard to put it back together. The other criteria that seems more, to me, the right one to go is with substantiated, a list of those with substantiated. But even that, what does that mean? To me, it means there's some kind of corroboration. It can't be a single allegation, and there has to be moral certitude. But I think if we could come to some kind of agreement about what those lists, what should be the criteria for publishing the list, I think that would be good. I don't think it can simply be anybody that's accused. And finally, I think our communications, and I brought this up in the priorities and plan, and I heard the response, but I think we have to fill the vacuum on communications, particularly in the Catholic media. I think some Catholic media has been very negative. I think they're our natural allies, but I don't think they've had anybody that they could go to get different information. And I think our people are confused about what this crisis is about and what it's not about. You know, I think it is about accountability of bishops. It is about accountability of the Holy See. It is about our treatment of victims and putting them, their care first, and particularly no matter how long ago it's happened. But there's this myth out there that nothing's happened since 2002, and that just really isn't true. And we heard that today from some of the speakers, and I think we have a message that we need to put forward. I don't think the silence is serving us well, and so that would be my encouragement.
Archbishop Lucas, followed by Bishop Boyer.
I've appreciated the discussion today, and I also offer my thanks for all the preparation that has gone into giving us some things to discuss in a specific way. This is a very personal reflection. I just have to say that how bishops are held accountable when there has been misconduct is not clear. I think there is a process that happens sometimes, but it's not timely. It's not transparent, even in terms of what the process is, our current situation. Our people expect it. I think we expect it. I would like to expect it myself. I had a similar situation 12 years ago or so, similar to what Archbishop Burns is experiencing now, where we had a diocese very much in turmoil, lots of information shared with the Holy See by various channels, people demanding that something be done in the case of a bishop, and it went on for years. No answers to be given, and then finally when action was taken, I was instructed to keep it all secret. So even when there was a kind of a resolution, it wasn't really a resolution. So I just think I want to witness to the fact that what we have now is not working, and it's not transparent, even in terms of what the process is, much less how it works, and it takes too much time. I was very disappointed yesterday when I heard your announcement about the instruction from the Holy See that we not take action, but I prayed about it and tried to think there's an opportunity here, there must be, and I think the opportunity is that we can do the Holy Father and the Holy See a service by being really clear as a result of our discussions about what we need to be more effective in our pastoral leadership and our pastoral governance here. I think we all appreciate it eventually when our priest might get together and try to help us see something about what they need or what's going on in our dioceses that we might not see ourselves. I think when we reflect on that, we see that as a gift and can receive it that way. When I receive that from my priests, ultimately I know it helps me be a better bishop. So I'd like to think we could help the Holy Father be a better shepherd. I think he would love to be as good as he can be, and we can assist him by being as clear as we can. I think we have had the experience with our review boards that when there's been an allegation, we really benefit from the help of dedicated laypersons who help us develop a body of evidence, who know how to do investigations, and whose judgment is prudent and respectful of the church. But that evidence can lead to the truth, and then the truth makes judgment possible for whoever is the person who has to ultimately make the judgment. So I hope that in whatever we might suggest, either to you, Your Eminence, or as a result of our discussions that can be considered by the Holy See and by the Church at large, that we rely on this wonderful experience that we've had and continue to encourage the involvement of laypersons who can be so helpful, who are essential, really, as far as I'm concerned. Finally, I hope maybe our discussions, whether or not on specific items we can come to some consensus, I hope that we can. Not even sure exactly what I'd vote for at this point, but the discussions today have been really helpful. But I hope maybe you yourself would be able to sum it all up in some kind of a statement at the end of our time this week. Again, just to really, my point is that we could express to the Holy Father our need for his help in restoring confidence here with our people and our desire to help him, so that can be a collaborative effort, which will be very ecclesial and mutually enriching.
Thanks, Archbishop Lucas, for all that you said. Thank you. Bishop Boyer, followed by Bishop Murray.
Cardinal DiNardo, it sounds like, following from Bishop Conlon, Bishop Thomas, and Archbishop Naumann, that it might be good for you to bring to the February meeting this whole issue about structuring better the role of the Metropolitan Archbishop, that perhaps some appropriate canonical changes might be considered at that February meeting to give more authority to the Archbishop, or, I suppose, the senior suffragan in a given situation, for oversight of episcopal behavior in the province. So it sounds to me that maybe this is one of the blessings of the delay in us approving things, is maybe this is the better route to follow. I frankly think this might have greater receptivity in the universal church, as it would also respect the history of our church, which has a long history in the early centuries of the importance of the Metropolitan See, until there was that intense centralization that took place in Rome. It seems some here have spoken of the value of this approach rather than the National Commission approach. It would be worth, it seems to me, for you to bring this to the February gathering. Nonetheless, in any case, this must engage the laity.
Thank you, Bishop. Bishop Murray, followed by Archbishop Wensky.
Thank you, Your Eminence. One of the things that I have heard a lot from the lay people in my diocese is that beyond the anger and the disappointment that they have experienced through this, they genuinely care about our priests and they genuinely care about us. And I've heard over and over again that they want to help us. And I think we have to be welcoming of their help. It's one thing to put lay people on various commissions because we feel we should or we have to. It's another thing to invite the laity and warmly welcome them to be collaborators with us in the best possible sense of the word so that we can learn from them and they can learn from us. Our role is very different than the role of the laity, and I think they understand that. But I think we have to go the extra mile, take the extra step to communicate to lay people that we hear their desire to help us and we welcome what it is that they have to say so that we can grow together to overcome this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Murray. Archbishop Wensky, followed by Bishop George Thomas.
We've had a lot of bad press, but I think we should be grateful that perhaps that Donald Trump is president because he dominates the news cycle. And if he didn't dominate the news cycle as he did, we probably would have a whole lot more bad press. However, I think we have to not allow ourselves to be distracted by the press. When I talk to my priests in my archdiocese, they tell me that people are coming to church, they're praying, they're sending their kids to catechism. The life of the church is moving on. And if you're not listening to if you're not reading the blogs, and if you're not watching cable TV, this is not front and center for most of our people. This is not, I don't want to dismiss the real pain of the victims and the challenges that we have to address it and to help them become survivors and heal. But at the same time, I think we have to maintain a certain perspective and do what we're supposed to be doing as bishops. Because when we fulfill our mission, that's how we're going to gain our trust or regain the people's trust. Now, there's a lot of outrage, and after the McCarrick incidents and everything like that, it seemed almost that the bishops were trying to compete with who was going to be the one with the most outraged reaction to the McCarrick incident. Outrage, I guess, is important and it has its place, but today outrage has also become an industry. It's become an addiction. As we see in our polarized politics, people are increasingly addicted to outrage, and it's become an industry in which bloggers and cable TV are using outrage as a business plan to drive readers or listeners to their sites or to their stations, and therefore raise their advertising revenue. So I think we can't allow ourselves to be caught and to be played by people that would exploit other people's outrage and use us to keep feeding it. We have to go about and do our what we're supposed to be as bishops and pastors, and as we do that, we will regain our people's trust. If the perfect storm of this summer proves anything, the anger of the people, if it shows anything, is that perhaps 2002 came too late for too many people, for too many victims. But 2002 marked a watershed in the life of this church in the United States. We've done a lot, and we have to tell our story better and not get played into the outrage business and get back to doing what we're supposed to be doing as pastors and shepherds of our people. We walk with them and they follow, we can regain their trust and serve them as we were called to do. Thank you.
Bishop George, go ahead. Please. Thank you. Thanks, Archbishop Wensky. Bishop George Thomas, followed by Cardinal Tobin.
Well, I came to the November gathering here carrying what I perceive to be the genuine expectations from the priests and people in my new diocese, that we would emerge from this gathering with a definitive response that addresses the question of episcopal accountability. I have to say that, Your Eminence, yesterday's announcement regarding the decision from the Holy See is being met in my world with considerable disappointment, in some cases outright rancor and anger. And it has placed certainly most of us on an ecclesial tightrope. On one hand, wanting to genuinely understand and be sensitive to the decision of the Holy See, and I think their real rightful concern for the need to weigh this question of episcopal accountability on a worldwide scale, and to have the various episcopal conferences weigh in to distill that wisdom and to emerge with better policies and pastoral practices for the worldwide community. At the same time, there is the real reality that in the minds of our people, and I think this is absolutely correct, the perception is that justice delayed is justice denied. And I think that it places us on a tightrope, on one hand, wanting in every way to support the mind of the Holy Father and the decision of the Holy See. On the other hand, my genuine hope that we'll emerge from this meeting with a strong advisory vote on behalf of this whole body that reflects the gravity of the issue at hand, the urgency of the matter, the depth of the breach of trust that has been experienced among victim survivors and certainly in our communities. I think that there is, in fact, an urgency, and I hope we do emerge with one voice, an advisory vote perhaps, that we will do everything in our power to remove a cancer and help heal this wound that is affecting so deeply the living body of Christ.
Thanks. Thank you, Bishop. Thank you very much. Cardinal Tobin, followed by Cardinal Levada.
Thank you, Cardinal. I'd like to offer what I can regarding all the investigations I know of into Cardinal McCarrick's behavior. First, there are the 4 dioceses where he served as a priest or as a bishop are conducting their own independent investigations. These investigations are complicated in at least, well, to some degree in all 4, but I'll speak for New Jersey, by the fact that we're under another investigation by the criminal task force that's been established by the Attorney General of the state. Where this complicates our lives is we have to make sure that we have the at least a bene placet from the Attorney General to do what we need to do. In Newark, we've engaged a private investigative service. We're ready to roll, but we need to have the go-ahead from the Attorney General. I believe in Metuchen's facing the same thing, and I think New York and Washington at least have similar investigations. I don't know if they have the same effect as those in the 2 Jersey dioceses. The second area is, the second investigation I know is going along quite speedily, and that's being conducted by Seton Hall University. Seton Hall University, among the events of this summer, received a complaint from a priest of the Archdiocese, of the Diocese of Albany, which caused them to initiate an investigation under Title IX, which prohibits sexual harassment. And so they have engaged an independent law firm that has been conducting interviews, examining files, et cetera, and they think they'll have their investigation done before the end of the year. Thirdly, I know that the Holy See, several dicasteries and an attorney that represents them in the United States are conducting their own investigations. As far as the diocesan investigations, we're committed to share our results with the Holy See, because the story, as everyone knows here, doesn't end simply on the east coast of the United States, but we have to follow what leads us over to the Holy See. And I would just, a thought that occurred to me while I was waiting my turn. I've heard a lot about the loss of credibility, and even felt it too in my own pastoral service in the Archdiocese of Newark. But it leads me to a question. If the events of the summer, as awful as they were, and their consequences are still with us, but if it can do such devastating and, in the minds of some, mortal damage to our credibility, what was there before? What was our credibility built on that it could be so swept away?
Thank you, Cardinal Tobin. Thanks for the information. Cardinal Levada, followed by Bishop McKnight. We'll continue the names, but we may have to go through tomorrow morning or tomorrow. We're going to just continue some of this where the time frame comes in. And the reason we're going to mention the time frame is there's an announcement that Monsignor Branstad has to make relative to the weather. So that's Cardinal Levada.
Thank you, Cardinal DiNardo. I rose to speak to the McCarrick situation, but now I want to make a preface because Cardinal Tobin has already given far more information about the one prong of my suggestion than I would be able to do. But I want to thank those of you who have welcomed me as an emeritus bishop here, and sometimes you inquire why I'm here, why I'm not enjoying my retirement. But just to say that the brother bishop in my class, Archbishop Favalora, has taken care of that side of the Bishop Emeritus's responsibility. He vowed when he retired that he would never again come to another meeting, and he's held true to that vow. He always has a funeral somehow in mind when anyone invites him to think about coming to a meeting. I wanted to make a two-pronged proposal regarding the Archbishop McCarrick situation. And again, I weigh very much the sage words of Cardinal Tobin about these parallel investigations. But it seems to me that there's something to be learned if the conference itself would analyze what happened in these four dioceses regarding the promotion and the transfer of Archbishop McCarrick. I don't know if that information is available, but if the bishops would do their best to reconstruct how that happened from any one of their predecessors, we know that the process for bishops who are already ordained when they're being transferred is not as serious a process as it is for the nomination of new bishops. And oftentimes, people are consulted who may know the prospective bishop, and they say, oh, sure, let old Joe go ahead, he's a nice guy, and so forth. So I'm not predicting anything about what would come from such but I think it would be helpful for us to do the due diligence about how we reacted in our dioceses. And I believe it could be the responsibility of the conference to do that. I know there are parallel investigations going on. Maybe we could learn something from that investigation. And then, too, maybe what we had learned we could bring to the Holy See. I think that just to say the Holy See is not to take, it's as if it were somehow a coherent operation than which everybody knew what everybody else was doing. But I would go as well as to the Holy Father, of course, who will then hand it over to the Secretary of State. I would think that making an intervention with the Congregation for Bishops, and now, as it turns out, with the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, which has the competence in sexual abuse of minors, I think those would go a long way toward gaining further awareness of the challenge that faces us in this particular instance, which is held up by so many of our people and certainly in the media as an egregious example that needs to be dealt with. Thank you.
Bishop McKnight, followed by Archbishop Sample.
Thank you, Your Eminence. I'll be very quick. The one overarching thing I want all of us to remember is, of course, the necessity of the laity in helping us get out of this mess. I think we all believe that. We all talk about it. But unfortunately, in concrete structures, we don't actually do it. And I very much support the idea that you have announced with the task force. Is there any way, maybe our bylaws don't allow for it, but is there any way to get 2 or 3 competent lay people to assist you in your tasks? Specifically, what I am concerned about is what several have brought as a proposal is a study. Archbishop Hebda mentioned it yesterday in his beautiful homily, that we need to study the root causes of the abuse of power by U.S. hierarchy. I don't think we fully understand it. And we have a lot of lay people who are very competent, who are skilled, who are trained, who have wonderful backgrounds that could be a tremendous resource to us. They could help put together an appropriate study that might involve a select number of dioceses that have a particular issue, where they could do a deep dive into them and do a meta-analysis of the data and come up with some proposals for us to consider. Sister Teresa mentioned yesterday in her talk, we have a lot of Catholic institutions of higher education, a lot of resources that are available. But we do need an objective understanding of the problem of the abuse of power so that we can respond to what in fact is the problem and not be carried away by myths we might be holding in our own minds. Thank you.
Archbishop Sample, followed by Bishop Soto.
My intervention at this point is, I think, going to be a little bit more reflective and perhaps a little philosophical and not as practical as some of the things that we've been hearing. I was very struck by and supportive of the comments made by Bishop Strickland, especially his emphasis on the saving message that we as pastors and shepherds of the church proclaim, that message in Christ. I think we are certainly living through what I believe is going to be seen as a watershed moment in the life of the church, not just in the United States, but I think in the Church Universal. I think 500 years from now, if Jesus hasn't come yet in his glory, and quite honestly, I'm praying every day he comes soon, this will be what they will study in church history. We will be studied. And I think what they will be studying is, how did we respond? How did the church, how did the shepherds, the bishops of this time respond to the crisis that we're in? And I think for me, this has provoked a profound sense of self-examination, really. And so I make this very personal. I don't want it all be perceived as pointing fingers at anyone, because you're all, I'm sure, much better shepherds to your people than I am. But I think it's a reminder that, the supreme law of the church is the salvation of souls. And this is the mission that we have been given in Christ. We are the sacramental representation of Christ in the world, the universal sacrament of salvation. And to Cardinal Tobin's very provocative question, I think I was very struck by that as well. What is our credibility based on? What was it based on? And have we as bishops lost a little bit the sight on what our mission is truly all about? That mission given us to teach and to sanctify and to shepherd God's people. And it's, as I have thought about it myself, I've been a priest for 28 and a half years and a member of this conference for 12 and a half years. And I've had to take a real good hard look at myself and how I'm living my life as a bishop in the church today. I think if you had asked me 4 months ago how I was doing spiritually in my relationship with Christ and my walk with Him each day as He helps me shepherd God's people, I probably would have told you I was doing pretty good. And in light of what we've been through, I've really had to look deeper for myself. And I think that the greater emphasis on the mission given us to evangelize, that is our primary mission, to evangelize and to share the good news of Jesus Christ, His saving message, to teach and catechize our people. As a member of the Catechism Subcommittee, we're constantly reminded of how poorly catechized and evangelized so many are, even those who write catechetical texts sometimes. Our mission to sanctify the world and to be leaders and the high priests of Christ's flock in helping sanctify the people and shepherding them and being close to our people. And this is where I think Pope Francis gets it so right. The closeness that we need to our people. And I shared with my priests at convocation this year that as their bishop, I need to be much closer to them. I need to spend more time with them. I need to spend more time with my people. Because I think so many of us see us as CEOs. And that guy up there in the archdiocesan office who sort of has the things come down from on high. And I think that we need reform. And I don't think reform we certainly need institutional things that need to happen, but I think reform always begins with us individually and a recommitment of ourselves to the sacred mission and the sacred office that has been given us in Christ. And for me, I hope that this moment will be a provocative moment for all of us to look deep and to renew ourselves and to lead our people more deeply into the Eucharistic heart of our Savior Jesus.
Thank you, Archbishop. I'd like to ask Bishop Soto now. Bishop Soto.
Several bishops have proposed that maybe we should go back and look how we can strengthen the power or the authority of the metropolitan and perhaps use that as an alternative system. And I'm sure that with the time that we have, that we will pursue that conversation further. But I guess I wonder, question whether the opportunity to reform or to strengthen the metropolitan in terms of providing oversight in this matter, that maybe that moment has passed and that we've missed that opportunity to do that, and that the current time when that transparency and that independent review seems to be more on the minds of many of the faithful, that we do have to continue to pursue what has been proposed by the committee, and to look at this this commission. I guess I was intrigued by Bishop Araki's distinction, and I'm hoping again that further conversation might surface whether in fact we do have the room to, while respecting the Holy See's concerns, that be able to move forward in the decisive way in making a decision that is good for the Church here in the United States.
Thank you, Bishop Soto. We have some others whom we will reserve for immediately tomorrow when we take up this conversation again, but it is 5:30, and Monsignor Branstad has a couple comments for us.
Thank you, Your Eminence, Your Eminences, and Your Excellencies. It is early yet, but the preliminary weather forecast for Thursday morning is indicating some measure of snow or ice to come upon the area. In light of that, the items that are scheduled for tomorrow for a vote would require a quorum. In consultation with the Executive Committee tonight and then tomorrow morning, determination will be made whether to move those items that require a quorum to advance them on the agenda. And you'll be notified by a blast email in the morning for any schedule adjustment. Again, the Executive Committee will continue to monitor those conditions so that the items requiring a quorum and a vote will be given priority within the schedule. Please check your email in the morning for any adjustments. As a reminder, amendments are due at 6 p.m. in the trays outside of this room. The body is currently scheduled to reconvene in regional meetings tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and to convene back in this room at 11 a.m. Thank you, Your Eminence.
Thank you. Brothers, thank you all very much for the comments this afternoon. I think they will be of great help to us for tomorrow as we return after regionals, not just to vote, but also to deal with these issues. All right, we'll do a doxology. I've been ordered by the General Secretary. Let's do that. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Our Lady's seat of wisdom, pray for us, Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thank you, brothers. Thank you very much. Okay.
I'll keep the names.